Could the future of the British monarchy be shifting before our eyes? The royal family has followed a strict line of succession for centuries, ensuring a clear transfer of power. But recent speculation suggests King Charles may have hinted at something unexpected, an adjustment to the traditional order. Did the king's words signal a greater role for Princess Charlotte? Could this reshape the balance of power within the monarchy? And what impact would such a change have on Britain's royal future? Reports began circulating, quietly at first, whispers among royal watchers, speculative murmurs from insiders who had long studied the inner workings of the palace. Then, without warning, the media exploded with a single claim. King Charles had made a shocking statement regarding the next heir to the throne. But the details were elusive. No official confirmation had been made, and yet the weight of the rumors was impossible to ignore. Journalists, royal analysts, and political commentators scrambled for answers. Had the king truly revealed his succession plans? If so, why now? After all, the line of succession had been clearly established for years. Prince William, the eldest son of King Charles, was the undisputed heir, followed by his children, beginning with Prince George. That was the way it had always been. No surprises, no controversy, just the expected passage of power from father to son, as dictated by tradition. But these rumors suggested something different. The speculation grew wilder by the hour. Was there a sudden change in the line of succession? Had the king named someone else as a potential ruler? Some believed it was nothing more than an overblown interpretation of a private discussion, a routine address that had been taken out of context. Others weren't so sure. For years, the monarchy had thrived on stability, even in the face of public scrutiny and scandal. The system was designed to endure, to be predictable, to provide continuity. Any deviation from that stability would be unprecedented in modern times. The very idea that King Charles had hinted at a new heir sent waves of uncertainty through political circles, fueling discussions about what this could mean for the future of the monarchy. The public reaction was immediate. Speculation ran rampant across social media. Headlines dissected every possible angle, and royal enthusiasts debated endlessly. Some were convinced that Charles had merely reaffirmed William's position, an expected gesture of stability. Others believed that his words had carried an underlying message, one that had the potential to alter the very foundation of the monarchy. It wasn't just the United Kingdom watching. The world had always been fascinated with the British royal family. But moments like these turned that fascination into obsession. Every royal commentator, historian, and journalist attempted to piece together the puzzle. Theories emerged, but none could be fully verified. Despite the speculation, the rules of succession had remained unchanged for centuries. British law dictated a clear order, ensuring that the throne passed down the direct line of descent. By all accounts, Prince William was the next king. His son, Prince George, would follow. Then came Princess Charlotte, followed by her younger brother, Prince Louis. That order had been reinforced by the Succession to the Crown Act of 2013, which removed male preference in the line of succession, allowing the eldest child to take precedence regardless of gender. But where did this leave Prince Harry? Once second in line to the throne, his place had gradually shifted downward following the birth of William's children. He was now fifth in line, his future in the monarchy seemingly distant. His decision to step back from royal duties in 2020 only deepened the divide. While legally, his place in the succession remained intact, the likelihood of him ever ascending the throne had become nothing more than a hypothetical discussion. And yet for some, the idea of Prince Harry becoming king wasn't entirely impossible. After all, history had seen stranger turns. If an unexpected event reshaped the royal order, if something unforeseen removed those ahead of him, Harry's position could theoretically change overnight. It was a scenario that had been discussed in hushed voices among royal analysts but never truly considered plausible. Still, the rumors surrounding King Charles' supposed statement had not hinted at Harry. If anything, the focus remained squarely on William and his children. That only led to more questions. What if Charles had signaled a change in the way the monarchy functioned? Could it be that he envisioned a more dynamic approach to succession, one that emphasized shared responsibility? Some speculated that the king had simply acknowledged Princess Charlotte's growing role, recognizing her leadership qualities alongside her brother George. Others wondered whether the king had gone further, suggesting a new model where siblings played a more active part in royal leadership rather than being relegated to supporting roles. This wasn't an entirely foreign concept. While the British monarchy had always followed a strict succession order, other royal houses in Europe had experimented with more collaborative approaches. Some monarchies placed emphasis on multiple heirs working together in governance, rather than a single ruler carrying the full weight of the crown. Yet such a shift would require a fundamental change to centuries-old traditions, something that seemed unlikely without clear legislative action. Charles himself had always walked a fine line between modernization and adherence to tradition. His reign had been described as transitional, a bridge between the past and the future. But was this transition happening sooner than expected? The lack of immediate clarification from the palace only deepened the uncertainty. Official statements were carefully worded, never fully addressing the rumors head-on. This left room for interpretation, and in the world of royal politics, interpretation could shape the course of history. In moments like these, history became a guiding force. The monarchy had faced succession crises before, moments when the expected path had been interrupted, reshaped, or entirely rewritten. The past had shown that even the most rigid traditions could be altered under the right circumstances. No one knew yet whether Charles had truly upended the order of succession. But one thing was certain: the conversation had been ignited. Whether based on fact or speculation, the monarchy had entered a moment of uncertainty. And in the realm of the British royal family, uncertainty was a rare and powerful force. As the speculation continued, it became clear that this wasn't just about King Charles and his statement. It was about the future of the monarchy itself. For the first time in years, people were asking a question that had long been settled. Who would be the next ruler of Britain? And more importantly, could the answer to that question change before anyone had expected? The weight of tradition had always anchored the British monarchy, ensuring that each transition of power followed a well-defined course. Through wars, scandals, and modern shifts in public opinion, the line of succession remained firm. Prince William had been the next in line from the moment he was born. His role as the future king had never been in question, making him one of the most well-prepared heirs in history. Yet, in the wake of King Charles's rumored announcement, the certainty of succession had been called into question. For centuries, the British crown had passed from one sovereign to the next based on strict hereditary rules. The principle of primogeniture ensured that the throne went to the monarch's eldest child, favoring male heirs until recent legal changes allowed gender equality in the line of succession. This meant that Prince William was the direct heir, followed by his children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis. But if the rules were so clear, why had King Charles's statement ignited such intense speculation? One possible reason was timing. Charles's reign was always seen as a transitional one, given his age and the circumstances under which he ascended the throne. Queen Elizabeth II had been a monarch for 70 years, and her presence had shaped public expectations of royal leadership. Charles, however, had inherited the crown at 73, already facing discussions about the longevity of his reign. Any reference to succession during his rule carried a different weight than it would have under a younger monarch. Even an offhand remark about the future could be interpreted as a signal of impending change. Then there was the role of Prince William, whose status as heir was undisputed, but whose future reign was increasingly scrutinized. William had spent decades preparing for his eventual ascension, carefully balancing royal duties with efforts to modernize the monarchy's image. He had cultivated a reputation as a leader who understood both tradition and the expectations of a changing public. His family, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, and their 3 children, represented a stabilizing force within the institution. In many ways, they were seen as the monarchy's future, embodying a mix of regal heritage and modern relatability. But public perception of the monarchy had shifted over the years. Where once the institution was seen as an unshakable pillar of national identity, recent events had shown that the royal family was not immune to scrutiny. The younger generations, including William and his children, were under increasing pressure to justify the monarchy's role in modern Britain. Speculation about how the crown might evolve had become more frequent, especially after the departure of Prince Harry from royal duties in 2020. Harry's place in the line of succession had become a point of interest for both royal watchers and political commentators. He was still technically fifth in line, a fact that remained unchanged despite his withdrawal from official royal duties. However, his absence from the inner circle of the monarchy had made his position largely symbolic. In reality, the chances of him ever becoming king were remote. The structure of the monarchy ensured that William and his children would remain the primary focus of succession planning. Even so, some questioned whether Harry's decision to step away had influenced Charles's approach to succession. Had his departure forced the king to rethink the monarchy's future? Was he subtly signaling a different role for his grandchildren, particularly Princess Charlotte? While nothing suggested that Harry was being considered in any new way, the broader implications of Charles's rumored statement left room for speculation. The question of Charlotte's place in the line of succession had taken on new significance in recent years. Traditionally, second-born royal children had occupied a supporting role, assisting the heir but never expecting to rule. Yet, in an era of changing traditions and evolving public expectations, Charlotte had begun to emerge as a figure of interest. Her presence at royal events, her confidence in public, and her natural ability to command attention had made her stand out. Unlike past princesses, she had been raised under new succession laws that guaranteed her position could not be displaced by a younger brother. Had King Charles simply acknowledged her growing role in the monarchy? Or had his words hinted at something more, perhaps a greater emphasis on shared responsibility between heirs? The modern monarchy had already seen shifts in the way roles were distributed. Queen Elizabeth had relied heavily on her younger sister, Princess Margaret, despite Margaret never being in direct line for the throne. Charles himself had worked alongside his siblings in supporting the monarchy's stability. Was it possible that a similar dynamic would now emerge between George and Charlotte? The idea of collaborative monarchy models was not unheard of. Other European royal families had experimented with systems where heirs played more active roles alongside each other. In some cases, younger siblings were given substantial leadership positions within the structure of the royal household. This helped share the burden of duty while maintaining a unified royal front. Yet, the British monarchy had always been different. Its strength lay in the clarity of succession, ensuring that power was passed seamlessly from one monarch to the next without confusion. Could Charles be the king who redefined that process? And if so, how would the public react? The British people had always had a complicated relationship with change in the monarchy. While the institution itself had evolved over centuries, major shifts were often met with resistance. The abdication of Edward VIII in 1936 had created a constitutional crisis that reshaped the royal family forever. Even more recently, discussions about reducing the number of working royals had sparked debates about the monarchy's long-term sustainability. If Charles had indeed suggested a different approach to succession, it would be one of the most significant royal developments in modern history. But until an official clarification was given, speculation would continue to drive the conversation. The uncertainty surrounding Charles's words was not just about who would be king or queen. It was about the very nature of monarchy itself. Would the British crown remain an institution defined by strict hierarchy, or was it beginning to shift toward a more adaptable form of leadership? What was clear was that the monarchy, despite its centuries-old traditions, was once again at a crossroads. The world was watching, waiting for clarity on what would come next. And in that moment of uncertainty, the future of the crown had never felt more open-ended. The weight of speculation hung over Buckingham Palace as the monarchy's future remained an open question. King Charles's rumored statement had ignited a conversation that no one had expected to have so soon. The British public, long accustomed to a structured and predictable royal succession, found itself asking what seemed like an impossible question. Could the established order be changed? To understand whether such a shift was even plausible, history had to be considered. After all, while the monarchy prided itself on continuity, history had shown that succession was not always as straightforward as it appeared. The British throne had been passed down through generations, but not without disruption. There had been times when the expected course of succession was upended by crisis, war, or personal choice. The modern monarchy was built on a foundation of tradition, but it had been shaped by moments when that tradition had been challenged. King Charles's rumored statement, if true, would not be the first time a royal succession had taken an unexpected turn. One of the most defining moments in succession history was the abdication of King Edward VIII in 1936. At the time, Edward was a popular monarch, but his reign was overshadowed by his desire to marry Wallis Simpson, an American divorcee. The British government and the Church of England opposed the marriage, arguing that a king could not marry a woman who had been divorced. Edward, unwilling to choose between his crown and the woman he loved, made a decision that shocked the world. He abdicated, stepping down as king after less than a year on the throne. His younger brother, George VI, was never meant to rule, yet he became king in his place. That single decision reshaped the monarchy forever. If Edward had remained king, Queen Elizabeth II would never have ascended to the throne. Her reign, which lasted 70 years and defined the modern royal family, was a direct result of an unexpected change in succession. It was a reminder that, while tradition dictated the order of the throne, real-world events could alter that course in ways no one had anticipated. A similar disruption had occurred centuries earlier, in the 15th century, during the Wars of the Roses. This brutal conflict between the houses of Lancaster and York was, at its core, a battle over who had the right to rule England. The struggle for power led to a series of violent conflicts, betrayals, and shifting allegiances. Monarchs were overthrown, exiled, and even executed. By the time Henry Tudor emerged victorious in 1485, defeating King Richard III at the Battle of Bosworth Field, the very structure of the monarchy had changed. Henry VII's marriage to Elizabeth of York united the warring houses and brought about the Tudor dynasty, but it came at the cost of decades of instability. The Wars of the Roses demonstrated that succession disputes had the power to shake the monarchy to its core. While today's royal family operated under a constitutional framework that prevented such conflicts, the historical precedent remained. Changes in leadership had occurred when the circumstances demanded it. If Charles had indeed hinted at a shift in succession, was he setting the stage for a modern, structured transition rather than a contested one? Another moment of unexpected royal transition came during the Glorious Revolution of 1688. King James II, a Catholic monarch in a predominantly Protestant country, faced growing opposition due to his religious policies. Parliament, fearing the return of Catholic rule, invited his Protestant daughter Mary and her husband, William of Orange, to take the throne. James fled, and William and Mary became co-monarchs in what was considered one of the most significant shifts in royal power. This event established the principle that the monarchy could not exist without the approval of Parliament, reinforcing the idea that succession was not just about bloodline but about national stability. Each of these events carried a common theme. Succession was never entirely predictable. While laws and traditions outlined the expected course, real-world factors had the power to shift the monarchy's direction. Wars, religious conflicts, and personal choices had all played a role in determining who would sit on the throne. The modern royal family no longer faced the same level of instability, but history served as a reminder that even a seemingly unbreakable tradition could be redefined. This context brought new weight to the rumors surrounding King Charles's words. If succession had changed before, could it change again? And if so, what would be the driving force behind such a decision? Unlike past centuries, where military conflict or parliamentary intervention played a role, today's monarchy operated under different pressures. Public opinion, media scrutiny, and political considerations all influenced the way the royal family functioned. Any shift in succession would not come from an external force, but rather from the monarchy itself adapting to the times. Public perception had already influenced the monarchy's approach to leadership in recent years. Queen Elizabeth II's long reign was defined by consistency, but even she had acknowledged the need for gradual modernization. The decision to update succession laws to remove male preference had been a step toward equality, ensuring that daughters had the same rights as sons when it came to inheritance. If Charles had hinted at a further shift, it could be a reflection of the ongoing evolution of the monarchy, rather than a dramatic departure from tradition. Speculation remained, but there was no clear answer yet. The palace had remained silent on the matter, neither confirming nor denying the claims that had set off this wave of uncertainty. The world was left to interpret the meaning behind Charles's words, just as it had done in past moments of royal transition. Until an official statement was made, history served as the only guide for understanding what could come next. What was certain was that the conversation about succession was no longer theoretical. It was real, immediate, and impossible to ignore. The monarchy had weathered centuries of change, and now, once again, it found itself standing at the crossroads of tradition and adaptation. The only question that remained was which path it would take. The echoes of history were impossible to ignore as speculation about the monarchy's future continued to grow. The British crown had always been defined by its ability to withstand change, adapting when necessary to preserve its authority. Yet, the question remained, was King Charles hinting at a transformation that would be remembered alongside the great succession crises of the past? Or was this nothing more than a carefully measured statement blown out of proportion? To understand the weight of such speculation, it was essential to examine how succession had been challenged in the past, and whether any precedent could apply to the current situation. Unlike previous power struggles, which had often been driven by political tensions, military conflicts, or personal decisions, the modern monarchy operated within a well-established constitutional framework. Parliament held the ultimate authority to legislate on matters of succession, ensuring that no single individual, even the king, could unilaterally decide to alter the order of inheritance. One of the most significant legal milestones in royal succession came with the Bill of Rights in 1689, which was passed after the Glorious Revolution. This legislation firmly established the principle that a monarch's rule was not absolute, but instead dependent on the consent of Parliament. It placed strict conditions on succession, ensuring that Catholic monarchs could not rule Britain and shaping the monarchy into the constitutional institution it remains today. Since then, any major change to the order of succession has required formal legislation, reinforcing the idea that the king alone could not alter the rules governing inheritance. This legal precedent meant that even if King Charles had made a statement suggesting an alternative future for the monarchy, it would not be legally binding. However, words carried weight, especially in an institution that relied on public perception and stability. Any suggestion that the succession might be handled differently, whether through increased responsibilities for Princess Charlotte, a greater role for the younger generation, or even an acknowledgement of his own limited reign, would send ripples through the monarchy. While historical changes in succession had been driven by necessity or crisis, the 21st century monarchy faced an entirely new challenge: public opinion. The monarchy no longer ruled by force or political control, but by maintaining relevance in an evolving society. Public support had long been the backbone of the institution, and in recent years, this support had fluctuated significantly. Polling data had shown that while the British public largely supported the monarchy, attitudes toward individual members of the royal family varied. Prince William and Catherine, the Princess of Wales, had consistently ranked as the most popular royals, seen as the face of the future. Their children, particularly Prince George and Princess Charlotte, were viewed as symbols of continuity. However, the same could not be said for King Charles, whose approval had never reached the heights of his mother's. Since ascending the throne, Charles had worked to reshape his image, positioning himself as a modernizing monarch while still adhering to the traditions that defined the institution. His advocacy for environmental causes, his support for interfaith dialogue, and his efforts to streamline the royal family's operations were all part of this strategy. But questions about his reign's duration persisted. At 75 years old, he was the oldest monarch ever to assume the British throne. Discussions about the future were inevitable, and any statement he made regarding succession was bound to be analyzed through the lens of transition. Another factor contributing to speculation was the role of the younger generation. Prince George, now 10 years old, had begun to take on a more visible role at public events, marking the early stages of his preparation for future kingship. His younger sister, Princess Charlotte, had also captured public attention with her confident presence, leading some to believe that she could have a more significant role than previous royal siblings. While tradition dictated that George would be the sole heir, modern shifts in royal responsibilities suggested that Charlotte could take on greater leadership duties alongside him. In contrast, Prince Louis, the youngest of William and Catherine's children, was still largely shielded from public life. However, history had shown that younger royal siblings often struggled to define their roles within the monarchy. Prince Harry's departure from royal duties had brought renewed attention to the challenges faced by those who were not direct heirs. In past generations, similar tensions had existed. Princess Margaret, the younger sister of Queen Elizabeth II, had struggled to carve out her identity, often finding herself in the shadow of her elder sister. It was possible that Charles, in acknowledging Charlotte's presence, was attempting to create a new model for royal siblings, one that ensured their contributions were recognized without leading to feelings of displacement. If so, it would mark a significant evolution in how the monarchy functioned, not by changing the order of succession, but by redefining the responsibilities of those within it. Despite the growing debate, one thing remained clear. The British monarchy was once again at a moment of transition. Whether King Charles had intentionally sparked this conversation or whether his words had been misinterpreted, the result was the same. The nation and the world was watching. The next steps would determine whether this was simply another chapter in the monarchy's long history or the beginning of something entirely new. The speculation surrounding King Charles's rumored statement had reignited discussions about the line of succession and forced both the public and the monarchy to confront a deeper question: what was the future of the British monarchy? The institution had survived centuries of change, adapting to new social, political, and cultural landscapes. But in an era where tradition was increasingly challenged, how would the monarchy remain relevant? Public sentiment played a crucial role in shaping the monarchy's future. Unlike in past centuries, where royal authority was absolute, the survival of the modern monarchy depended on maintaining public confidence. Recent years had shown that public perception of the royal family was unpredictable, fluctuating with moments of controversy and national unity. King Charles had inherited the throne following the stability of Queen Elizabeth II's 70-year reign, and his challenge was not just to rule, but to ensure that the monarchy remained aligned with contemporary Britain. The most pressing concern was the generational shift within the monarchy. Prince William and Catherine, the Princess of Wales, had been positioned as modern yet deeply rooted in tradition. Their children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, were still young, but expectations were already immense. George, as the direct heir, had always been at the center of discussions, his path mapped out since birth. However, the increasing attention on Charlotte suggested a shift, one that acknowledged the changing role of royal siblings in a modern monarchy. If Charles had hinted at an expanded role for Charlotte, it could reflect a response to the challenges faced by past royal siblings. The struggle for purpose had historically been a source of tension, with figures like Prince Harry and Princess Margaret finding themselves in uncertain positions within the institution. Prince Andrew's fall from grace further emphasized the difficulties faced by non-heirs. If the monarchy sought to redefine these roles, it could create a clearer structure for future generations, while preventing the tensions that had plagued past royals. However, any move that suggested even a slight adjustment to the line of succession would be met with scrutiny. The monarchy had survived by adhering to established traditions, and the idea of shared or expanded royal duties could be seen as a departure from that. If Charlotte were to take on greater leadership responsibilities, it would need to be carefully framed as a modernization effort rather than a challenge to George's position. At the heart of these discussions was the reality of Charles's reign. At 75 years old, his time as king was inevitably shorter than his mother's. He had always been seen as a transitional monarch, leading the monarchy between Queen Elizabeth II and Prince William. His approach had been focused on long-term planning rather than personal legacy. His rumored statement about succession, whether accurately reported or misinterpreted, could have been part of that strategy, subtly preparing the monarchy for an eventual transition. How the public would react remained uncertain. Traditionalists would likely resist any perceived shift in succession, while younger generations were more open to modernization. Polls showed that while support for the monarchy remained strong, there was a growing expectation that it should evolve to reflect society. Charles had to navigate this carefully. Too much change could alienate core supporters, while too little could make the monarchy appear outdated. For now, Buckingham Palace had remained silent, allowing speculation to grow. Without official confirmation or clarification, the public was left to interpret Charles' words through the lens of history and expectation. Was this a signal of an approaching transition, or merely an acknowledgement of the younger generation's importance? Would the monarchy continue on its traditional path, or were deeper structural changes ahead? One thing was certain: the monarchy had entered a new phase. Whether Charles had intended to spark this conversation or not, the debate over succession and the future of the royal family was now unavoidable. In a world where institutions constantly evolved, the British Crown faced the challenge that had defined its survival for centuries: the ability to adapt while preserving its traditions. The choices made in the coming years would determine the monarchy's strength for generations to come. With that, we have reached the end of today's video. If you have come this far with us, be sure to check out other videos on the channel.